Back live with you tonight on In Focus, and thanks for staying on. The National Student Financial Aid Scheme yesterday appeared before Parliament's Higher Education Portfolio Committee. This follows ugly scenes by university students who are demanding the issues of historic student debt, accommodation and registration be addressed as a matter of urgency. NSFAS said it's now working with private accommodation service providers across South Africa, adding that 3,000 beds have been allocated this month alone. For more on this, we're joined now by the Deputy Higher Education Minister, Buti Manamela. DM, good evening. Thank you very much for your time.
Good evening, and thank you for having me once more.
Yeah, just a coincidence that the NSFAS announcement came out. But initially, I wanted to bring you in because it's Human Rights Month, and we wanted to talk broadly around the issues of academic freedom. Right, and of course, budgets and budget limitations fall into that in terms of allowing free learning, free teaching, and free research in the country. Do we have it explicitly stated, this concept of academic freedom, in our constitution?
Actually, I think so. And if not, we have expressly stated it in the various educational statute, particularly the Higher Education Act, and the various policies that govern the post-school education and training. And the importance of academic freedom is to ensure that the state does not micromanage the extent within which institutions, provide education. And I think we've seen how in the past, when institutions were strangulated by the apartheid regime, some of them became the bastions of the continuation of that, system. So we want institutions to freely, express themselves because, academic spaces are important spaces of freedom. But we obviously also understand that there's no university that can exist within the context of a country wherein we have specific developmental goals. So it means that in the vein within which institutions can express their academic freedom, it has to be linked to the national goals that we want to achieve. And that's why beyond whatever choice of programs they provide, and the content and the substance of those programs, we also expect them to, meet a certain number of engineers, a certain number of scientists, a certain number of educators, and also postgraduates. So the balance between those two is important. Universities have to remain a contested space of ideas, and if the state were to strangulate that, I think it would be quite unfortunate. But I think it's important that institutions use that right, responsibly, because in some instances the whole issue of academic freedom and institutional autonomy, has somewhat, pushed university managers to flirt with, a somewhat cessation tendency. So the relationship between universities and those institutions should be transactional, and that we shouldn't have a say in terms of some of the problems that exist. Of course, so there need to be a balance between the two.
So how are you trading that balance in as far, for example, as issues like budget cuts? I know during the 2021 budget, when we had to, of course, cut budgets across all departments and reprioritize some of the spending in order to cover the COVID-19 spend, which, of course, the country was dealing with. Others are saying those cuts actually continued. Your department didn't cut 20%. I think you negotiated an 8% kind of cut. But
yes.
Did you bounce back? I mean, are those limitations not precisely doing that, putting some kind of pressure on these institutions?
Look, I mean, firstly, education budget, especially post-education and training budget, has been on the increase, and fundamental increase. And I think at that time when there were proposed budget cuts, the then minister was quite merciful when it comes to, our situation. And also the fact that there were additional resources that were added at that time. Yes, we still remain constrained. There's massive infrastructure backlog in accommodation, in the number of TVET colleges that we still need to see going up, which is a major priority, for both the ministry and the department, because by 2030 we have to achieve at least something closer to 2.7 million students in the TVET sector, and of course contributing, expanding the university sector, contributing to community colleges. So it's huge infrastructure spending that we're looking at, and therefore so there is that shortfall, but also the balance between what we grant universities and TVET colleges vis-a-vis the resources that they generate from the private sector has somewhat exacerbated the inequality amongst institutions. So, because most of the private sector resources are going to the top-ranked universities.
Yes.
And I mean I can name them: Wits, UCT, Stellenbosch, Rhodes, UJ, University of Venda, University of Limpopo, Forte, and all of those institutions continue to, not have any major private sector investment. And so that balance is also important, because the state alone, will not be able to carry the responsibility of providing skills for the nation. So in as much as the spending by from the national fiscus in terms of education has been on the rise, there is still a huge, shortfall in terms of the objectives that the National Development Plan has set upon us. If you look at, for instance, NSFAS, some 30 years ago it was a 5 million rand, about 30 million rand entity. We're now talking 49 billion rands.
Yeah.
About 1.2 million students going to be funded. 90% of students who go to TVET colleges, and I think more than 60% of those students go to university. But the demand is still out there. I think you probably, in the newsroom may have students who say, look, I've qualified well, and I believe I qualify for NSFAS. Maybe they don't fall within that bracket. So it shows you that the demand out there is still there, and therefore we probably have to be rethinking in terms of what the priorities are and and all of that. But budget cuts are, of course, a significant challenge.
So talk a little bit about that. They call it corporatization in other instances, or at least some academics are worried about that fact. The private sector is getting involved in these particular institutions, corporatizing them in a sense, much to the threat of academic freedom. The managers that are there are no longer people who are interested in academics, more interested in running those institutions like a business. So you'll hear a lot of restructuring, certain positions that are tradition in universities being redefined in some other ways, the reducing of staff and so on and so forth, being a threat to academic freedom going forward.
Look, we have to reiterate the fact that in as much as, university education is a privilege, but it remains an important public good. And in as much as we expect, the state to protect the academic freedom and institutional autonomy of those institutions, the same should probably, well, not even probably, but should also apply, from the private sector. Of course, both the state and the private sector, when investing in these institutions, they have certain expected outcomes. But I think we probably have to debate whether universities, some boasting about huge surpluses, when on the other hand you have students being financially excluded, particularly the missing middle. And you have all sorts of things where, with labor here, there, and all of that. So I think it's important that we probably have a discussion about that as to, the extent within which we should be running universities as a student-led. Some of the students have got brilliant ideas in terms of how we can deal with things like student debt, particularly that student debt that's owned by universities. Which is calculated at about 16 billion rand. Of course, insignificant compared to what is happening globally. because of the role that the South African government is playing in student funding, but I think you're raising an important point that we'll have to look at as to whether should we have universities having these huge surpluses, whereas there is a certain shortfall in terms of the demand for university education in our country. However, I think that over the next few years, our focus has to be in expanding the TVET sector.
Yeah.
We have privileged universities for so long. Everyone wants to go to a university. Even, if we ask someone, what do you want to be? They say, I want to be a mechanic. Okay, come a motor mechanic. The best institution is a TVET college, but they would still insist of wanting to go to a university.
Well, it's because you need to elevate the status of TVET colleges and make them glamorous.
That's what we do.
So we're going to run out of time. So I see you're wearing your blazer today for well-skilled South Africa. What are you doing to address the skills issue in South Africa, particularly the skills that are required in our economy?
Yeah. Look, when the president launched the economic recovery plan, our department looked at it and said, what are the skills need that will support this economic recovery plan? And we identified, the sectors that are going to be driving the economy, and then narrowed it down to specific skills, and also put them as per sector. What do we expect from universities? What do we expect from TVET colleges, from our sector education and training authorities, and also from our community colleges, to meet the demand in terms of skills in the country. On an annual basis, the minister releases a list of priority skills, which all of our institutions are supposed to be looking at those and providing them, as per the demand. There's always been this thing that there is a skills mismatch in our country. And I mean, the commitment which we've made is to work with industry, and they're fully involved in curriculum design, and the substance of what gets provided. In fact, some of them, if you go to some of our TVET colleges, the type of machinery that they get trained on is even better than what's available in the private sector. And the private sector relies on some of those machines, ends from the graduates from those institutions to keep to meet their skills demand. So there is private sector involvement, which I think is important. So in the overall, our TVET colleges, our community colleges, our sector education and training authorities, and our community colleges, and to a certain extent universities of technology, are at the center of getting young people to be skilled. The potential for a graduate to be employed is actually much higher than anyone who've completed their grade 12. And I think that's why we're doubling our effort in terms of meeting the skills demands of the country.
How does participating in a competition like the World Skills Competition contribute towards that?
Yeah. Firstly, I think beyond it being a competition, we had, I think, 14 skills that were participating at the World Skills last year. Although we unfortunately didn't get any medal, but I think the experience and exposure to globally agreed standards in terms of a particular skills empowers our participants. I mean, you have participants in bricklaying, in welding, but also in 3D printing, in restauranting, but also in things like mechatronics, motor mechanics. So it's a variety of skills that covers, what's needed out there in industry. But not only do we, get the benefit of exposing the participants to that experience, competing with the best in the world, but also, the crafting of the curriculum and the kind of tasks that they are given there also helps to inform the kind of curriculum design that we need, here locally. So the next one is in France, in Lyon, in 2024, September. And we're looking at, participants in all those areas. If you think you're a best car mechanic, so apply.
Yeah.
Check out our website.
Is that all it takes? Just apply.
And then apply.
So tighter recruitment process? How do you go deliver to God?
So you obviously apply, and then we look at the applications, we look at the kind of skills and exposure, and so people will then be invited into regional, into provincial, and then the national competition. And whoever succeeds there will go and represent South Africa at the Africa and World Skills. And I must say that, in fact, most of those who participated there, because of the exposure that they've had, not only have they gone to play an important role in industry, but some of them have started their own businesses and are employing others, and they're doing quite well. So I really want, young people out there, if you're younger than 20, if you're 25 or younger, if you are working or in a TVET college or whatever, and if you're involved in a particular skill, do check out World Skills and then apply.
Deputy Minister, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much as always
for
coming through and joining us in the studio. That's the Deputy Minister for Higher Education, Buti Manamela.